chicken. I'm your guy.
Blinking.
I'll have what Joseph's has.
Look, somebody's talking about you.
This is what we call the voice of God.
Popping.
Everybody just gets to focus on you.
Grab me.
Probably not the best thing for an introvert.
I'm asking for you.
Well, I like a good chicken sandwich.
Touch me. Hi, David. Comment.
Oh my God.
Like.
You're actually an identical twin.
Push.
Maybe I'll just ask Julie to talk about what it is to be an identical twin.
Pick me up.
No, you didn't.
Shouting.
Surprise! Jeremiah, just hang on a second. I just got a text.
There's an edit for your new opening, Joseph.
I feel really honored to have been here, man.
By the way, you've done a masterful job. Seriously.
It was such a joy.
Thanks, Joseph. It's an honor.
Good on you. This was a pleasure.
I mean, you are the prime example of how to pivot in this new environment.
I wish everybody gets an opportunity to interact with Joseph Jaffe and Corona TV.
Who needs Cameo when I've got my own personal Cameo? Well, welcome everybody to Corona TV. It is September 22nd. It is Tuesday. I am going to start off on a pretty somber and a serious note because it needs to be said that, you know, today we in the United States of America, or as I call it these days, the divided states of America, or the hypocritic states of America, we crossed an awful threshold, a milestone that nobody wanted to achieve, and that is 200,000 souls, 200,000 lives have been lost due to the global pandemic. And I just wanted to, I'm going to take myself off screen, and if you wouldn't mind, just join me in a moment for all their passing, and you know, may their memory be a blessing. Well, thank you very much for doing that with me. And, you know, we will now move and return to a show that is about hope, positivity, and optimism. And I'll do it gradually because today is really 3 different days. Today is voter registration day. And, you know, as always, if you want to make a difference, then you've got to go out and vote. It's about as simple as that. And every single person needs to deliver that message. Quite frankly, I don't care what your political leanings are. I just care that you use this gift that you were given, which is to be able to vote. If you live in a democratic republic or democratic country, you need to be able to exercise your vote and know that your vote counts, even if you think it doesn't. But your vote, your influence makes a difference. And so, you know, if you want to know what to do, go to nationalvoterregistrationday.org, and you can find out how to get an absentee ballot and how to register to vote. Stand up, show up, step up, and vote. It's about as simple as that. And I think we can all do this and make a difference. Hello to my mom who's watching. Hello to Amy Rika who is watching. I'm glad to have you guys. So far, it's all women, which is a glorious day as far as I'm concerned. My mom, Amy, and of course my guest, and I will tell you all about her soon enough. Well, it's also happy first day of fall. As I said, I'm going to bring you back from the brink. We went from this idea of voter registration and standing up and making a difference as a citizen to the fact that today is the first day of fall. It is not a happy day for me because I do not like fall. I do not like winter. I like summer. I like warmth. I like running outside. But I know a lot of people love to see the leaves change and love fall. Actually, fall is an amazing season, so enjoy it. And then finally, it is Happy Hobbit Day. So I told you I'll bring you back. Now we're back into hope, positivity, and optimism. And who is more hopeful, positive, and optimistic than a hobbit? So celebrate with all the hobbits out there in New Zealand or wherever the hell they live. Someone who is not a hobbit is Tamsin Webster. She is the founder and chief message strategist. It's actually a bit of a tongue twister, Tamsin, at Find the Red Thread. And I cannot wait for her to join me today. She is my guest today. Tomorrow, John Battelle, Kuda Biza, and then Bob Liadis rounding off the week. So a lot of amazing people and conversations to have. Let's do birthdays very briefly. Stan Phelps, Tim Leake on Facebook, and then on LinkedIn as well. We've got Gianni, we've got Katrina, Lazar or Lazar, Pietro. Happy birthday to all of you guys. Hope you have a good day today. Well, now it's time to go into our seated soliloquy. And you know that the way that we look at the seated soliloquy is to be inspired by our guest. And Tamsin is all about discovering and uncovering and going on a journey to find purpose and meaning. And so that's why I thought we would discuss that today on the seated soliloquy. So first of all, let me apologize to my guest today. Off the bat, I'm apologizing to Tamsin Webster because I think I've actually been using the concept of the red thread completely wrong. But ironically, I think it's helped me find meaning along the way. So before the show, I decided to do some research on the origins of the red thread. And I actually discovered the red thread of fate, which is an Eastern belief similar to the idea of a soulmate. Now, legend has it that there exists an invisible red string that connects those who are destined to meet regardless of time, place, or circumstances. So obviously we're personal soulmates. Maybe Tamsin is my professional soulmate, which is why I've got the red thread behind me. Not content though on that definition, I found another explanation which actually comes from a Greek myth. But actually I think I'm going to go ahead and let Tamsin explain it to you herself in her words.
The red thread comes from a little-known detail of a well-known Greek myth, the Minotaur and the Labyrinth. The Minotaur was a monster, half man, half bull, and it lived in the center of a maze, the labyrinth. Every 9 years, the people of Athens would have to send their 7 best boys and their 7 best girls as a sacrifice to the Minotaur. Otherwise, an evil king would come and destroy the city. One year, one of the boys was named Theseus, and he was determined that he was going to kill the Minotaur. So he snuck a sword with him into the maze. But he realized that the Minotaur wasn't the only monster he had to slay. The maze itself was a trial. And by some accounts, that maze was pitch black. So even if he could find his way to the Minotaur and kill it with his sword, he would have to find his way back out again in order to save his friends. So he brought something else into the maze with him. He brought a ball of red thread. He unwound it on his way in so he could retrace it, follow his steps back out after killing the Minotaur, which he did, and save his friends, which he did. I love the name The Red Thread because it describes in so many ways exactly what the red thread does. It helps us figure out how is it that we navigate the world around us? What are the monsters that we slay? What are the swords that we carry? And importantly, how can we follow that path right back out again so that we can understand better how not just to manage the change that's around every corner, but how to master it. So that's where the red thread comes from. What's yours?
So I'm trying to think that maybe I was a Minotaur at some point because I was half man and half bull, or at least maybe some people might have heard me talking some bull in my past. But let's get back to the subject at hand. I think maybe I was mixing up the idea of a common thread and a red thread. For example, I would say that my 5 books have the following red threads in common: change, innovation, disruption, creativity, and optimization, as in moving money around from one budget to another, like from acquisition to retention. But these days, I think I might be a little closer to the correct use of the phrase when considering the meaning that I have found in and through Corona TV, especially considering what it's brought to my life and, more importantly, what it's bringing to other people's lives. ironically, it's a shared red thread between myself, my audience, you guys, my community, my friends, and my family. And so in doing so, it is a red thread we all have in common. So it's a common red thread, or in short, a common thread. So maybe I was actually right all along. Well, we'll see what Tamsin thinks and whether she agrees or disagrees with me. But for now, let me give you a little bit of an introduction to Tamsin. As a professional idea whisperer, Tamsin helps people find, build, and tell the stories of their ideas. She combined 20 years in brand and message strategy with 4 years as a TEDx executive producer to create the Red Thread, a simple way to change how people see and what they do as a result. Though as she'll tell you, everything she knows about people, speaking, and change, she learned at Weight Watchers. Today, Tamsin is a globe-hopping keynote speaker who consults with companies like small companies like Verizon, J&J, and State Street Bank on how to get their big ideas to have the impact they deserve. And so now, without further ado, let me bring her onto the show. Welcome, Tamsin.
Hey, Joe, how are you?
How was that for an introduction? Because first time I've actually brought a video into the soliloquy. So I love doing things that I've never done before on the show.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was a first.
I had to go. Part of me is like, oh my gosh, it was such a little baby back then when I recorded that one. Because that was, I think, like video 2 out of ultimately what was about 100 in that series. And then I've done, I took about a year off of doing them and then have started them back up. And so I go back and look like, oh man, little video baby. But that was awesome. I love that.
And I saw that you're returning to them, which is great as well. It's I'm returning to video too. It was 10 years ago that Jaffe Juice TV basically quietly died a painful death, and now it has been resurrected. So there you go. There you go.
That's everything old is new again, right?
So Chip is here, and he is taking issue or umbrage with the fact that I don't know. So let me be like the the most interesting man. I don't always like cold, but when I do, I prefer fall. Is that better?
I think that works well. As a New Englander, I adore fall because fall is just like a lovely. I like seasons, and therefore I think New England's one of the best places. New England part of the U.S. is a great place to be because we definitely do have 4 distinct seasons, none of which is too extreme. But there is just something, I don't know. There's something. So much about Boston is where I am is rooted in the flow and the cadence of the educational schedule because we have so many colleges and universities here that there's just something when you first get that snap, cool, crisp day of fall that it's like kind of a new year. I think one of our mutual friends, acquaintances, Laura Gassner-Otting, kind of made a comment along those lines recently where it's just there's a newness that comes to fall, which is a little counterintuitive, but. And
I will say, that there is nothing, and I mean nothing quite like running. I try and run as often as I can when the leaves are changing, and the amount of times, especially here in New England, the amount of times I'm running, and I almost kind of run into a tree because I'm just looking up and I'm gaping at these magnificent colors all around me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can just see it. Boom. Well,
I was surprised to see you say that like you didn't like fall because to me like fall is like it's perfect running weather because it's like crisp and cool and like your times are awesome.
I still like the warmth. I still like being warmer when I run. Although this year, especially us being cooped up and at home. I'm going to have to just suck it up. And you know how it is. The first couple minutes it's a little cold. And even if it's 26 degrees outside Fahrenheit, at some point you're going to still take that beanie off because of your body heat,
Right.
All right. Yes. So let's see who else. So Wesley, I'm wondering which Wesley, maybe it's Wesley Faulkner, who's saying he loves, he He loves me. Well, I love you too. And Chip, because Chip is an agency guy, he noticed that both of us are wearing red today. Not a coincidence.
It's orange, so it's in the red family. I try actually to, except for that one video you showed, I actually try to avoid wearing red because I don't want to be that person. But.
And mine might be more like a maroon. Oh yes, it is
maroon, like a Merlot, a Burgundy.
Yes, a Merlot. Pretty much like what's in my glass every day during the pandemic at about 5 p.m. It's 5 p.m. somewhere. It's 5 p.m. pretty much here all the time.
There you go.
All right, so Tamsin, for people that don't know you, let's get into what I like to call fun facts. And we have a bunch of very interesting fun facts as far as you are concerned, like very, very interesting ones, starting off with the fact that you are an adult with a baby tooth. I don't know if it's out in front.
It's not, no.
But
it's actually back here, but
so
I say, like, talk about like holding on to your youth. What's that?
How does that happen?
It's very. I think it's an indicator of my tenacity, or at least my teeth. Like, I don't know. So I was born, like, I have a congenital mutation where was missing 4 adult teeth, which meant I had 4 baby teeth actually up until I was like 28, and then slowly but surely we've had to like remove and replace those teeth. But there's still one left. So I am desperately hanging on to my youth. And that poor thing should have fallen out when I was like 15 or 16. So it has done yeoman's service in my mouth.
You need to keep it in your mouth, because if there's been a common thread, maybe not a red thread on Corona TV, it's been the fact that as children, we are curious, we are creative, we have all these amazing qualities, we are hopeful, and then just life beats it all out of us, whether it's schooling, whether it's work, whether it's, we become pessimists when we are, I actually heard over the weekend that our natural state is to be happy. Happiness is our natural state. So when you see someone who is unhappy, it is not a natural thing. And you have to help people get back to this default position, like a baby. Babies are naturally happy, except when they aren't. And when they aren't, it's because of, pee or poop or food or they're sick or or they're tired.
Yeah.
I think it's just a great way to think about life.
100%. I mean, I'm a big believer in framing and mindset. Because we can add another fun fact here. I mean, I had a panic disorder for 17 years from the age, I'm going to get my numbers wrong, but from 17 to 34. I mean, severe enough that it was, medicated on and off at times. And one of the big things that was a path to me getting out of it was realizing it was my thoughts that got me into it, and kind of having that big realization of, well, if I thought my way in, I can probably think my way out too. And that really kind of, that along with a lot of, some other things that happened just, during and since, really has set that a huge amount of my outlook and my life and my work, frankly, is about just how do you frame it? Because if you change how you frame it, you change how you see it. It really is as simple as that.
Oh, I love that. So if you change how you frame it, you change how you see it. So can you give me an example of what that might, practically look like?
Sure. I mean, so here's, kind of going with what we're doing right now, right? I mean, all of this, and, we could look at it as I am, you and I both, our businesses, our lives, our careers kind of got completely upended by all of this. I spent much of my time on the road in front of people, talking, training, doing workshops, that kind of thing. And that has stopped. And so I can look at it as like, oh my gosh, well, when everything goes back to normal, and then get frustrated when normal keeps getting delayed for one reason or another. That to me just creates this, that's just a constant cycle of disappointment, right? And so the way that I've chosen to look at it is, well, this is what's normal right now. So let me figure out how to make it work for me right now. And so really, even as it's come to figuring out my business, it's like, well, I need to think about my business as if speaking were not part of it, as if live in-person events were not part of it. Since they're not, what does that look like? What can I get excited about? What can I focus on? What can I do? How can I build a business that doesn't rely on that? So that when it does come back, then it's like, oh, extra bonus, free prize. I got that. Rather than something else, right? So I think just even something as simple as that. Actually, I heard it phrased really well one time in context of parenting, where, not my phrase, but I love it, where someone said, look for the flowers, not the weeds. Meaning, like, in the midst of dealing with your kids where something could be frustrating and they could be doing a thing where it's like, oh my gosh, here they go again. Or here's my son getting all up in how things should be and da, 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 da. And I can either look at the weeds and be like, oh my gosh, here goes this thing again. Or I can look at the flowers and say, isn't it lovely that he is so focused on justice and fairness and passionate about that? And then I can look at it and say, what can I do to preserve that? While still guiding him to be kind of a human that can function in the world, right? So it makes such a difference. Like, you really do choose how you think about things. And while I believe you can't choose how you feel, I do believe you can choose how you think, and how you think directly affects how you feel. So that's kind of the hack to it all.
It's so funny because this past weekend was the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, and I'll actually share. It was funny because the rabbi's speech was all about happiness. That's actually where I got this idea, or not idea. This is where I got the fact that happiness is a natural state. But he said two other things that I just wanted to share with you. One, he said, if you keep on saying, if this happens to me, I'll be happy. If I get that promotion, I'll be happy. You'll never be happy. If I make my first $1 million, I'll be happy, because of course you'll always want more. And then he also tells the story of how this man wrote the very famous Rebbe, a long letter, and he complained in the entire letter. This is flowers and weeds for you. He complained in the whole letter. He said, "My life is so difficult. I've got a boss who doesn't appreciate me. I'm not being paid what I'm worth. I get home and my wife just screams at me all the time. The kids don't listen to me, and I can't sleep properly at night. I'm up, tossing and turning." And the rabbi basically writes him this long letter back. And he touches on every single detail. And he said, "I'm so happy for you and your life." Now, you probably can anticipate where this is going to go. He said, "I'm so happy you have a job. And I'm so happy that you are married with a wife. And I'm so happy that you have children that are around you. And I'm so happy that you have a bed to sleep on." And he continues going down. And I think that's just the perfect way to frame what you just said about flowers and weeds.
Absolutely. I had a therapist actually one time who said to me, the opposite of resentment is gratitude. And I was like, that was like one of these like mind-blowing moments, because I was in therapy at the time because I was pissed as hell about some things that were going on in my life. And I remember him saying that to me, and I was like, oh my, but I'm not ungrateful. And just that realization of like, oh, but if I'm choosing to stay in a state of resentment, then I am choosing to feel this thing over and over and over again. And what you say is so true. This idea that, people say, when this happens, I'll be. This is actually one of those lessons I learned in all those years that I was a Weight Watcher leader. And it's really counterintuitive for people to understand. But what happens is that if you don't think that you have what you need right now, and that you'll get it all when, it means that everything that you're doing right now to try to get that is actually fundamentally at odds with who you think you are, right? So if you think that you will be happy and successful, and so you try to do some things that will let you do that, there's still something deep inside of you that says, but you're not successful, so why are you doing this? There's this schism, there's this dissonance that you actually, as a human being that exists over time can't tolerate long term, because we can't tolerate that kind of dissonance long term, where we're doing something that's at odds with how we see ourselves and how we see the world. So that's the kind of crazy secret to all of this, if there is any of it, is that you have to figure out, how are you already successful in what you're doing? How is it that you can look at how have you already achieved what you're looking for? How can you look at it and say, I already have the resources that I need? What would that do for you if you looked at it that way and said, actually, I have everything I need to be successful right now. Let me just figure out what those things are. It's a completely different mindset, but it's one of power and it's one of strength. And, one of the things that I would say often to my Weight Watcher members is that, the surest leaps, the biggest leaps start from the surest ground. Like, you cannot take a big leap to something if you're standing on quicksand. Like, it's physically impossible. So you have to figure out what's stable and strong right now from which you can launch into something else. And I think that's one of those key things. And if I do anything with my clients and with myself, frankly, is that's a constant practice of like, where is the strength right now? How can we use that strength to push us into a new and different direction, if that's what we're looking for?
It's so funny listening to you, and what I love about these Corona TV conversations is that very, very quickly they end up going in a direction which we might not have even have thought, that we ended up talking about happiness. But as you were talking, this is what I realized is, we, the speakers, we, the keynote speakers and the authors and the people that were on or the circuit, we've actually become, in a way, therapists, because the amount of people we've met and connected with, and the stories that we've heard along the way, we are living the ultimate reframe right now. Being able to, but also elevate the conversation and realize that there were things maybe we spoke about, like how to optimize your digital marketing, SEO, and video. And you're like, I don't know that that's overly meaningful right now. We're going to need to, even if that's what we do, we're going to need to supplement that with some, as you say, what a great quote. The biggest leaps come from the surest ground. We need to make sure the ground that we live and operate and walk on is sure ground. And that comes from, happiness, and it comes from just being, being grateful with what we have versus coveting what we don't.
Absolutely. So I see my father-in-law is watching. So, hey,
there he is. Hello, Thomas.
There he is. Hi.
Little shout out for Thomas.
Yeah, exactly. So there is this, it's funny. This whole idea of the strength that you already have, it came all together for me in this situation that I went, there was a birthday party that I have two sons, and they were invited to, and probably a couple of years ago now. And it was, at the time, I don't know, 8 or 10, it was a rock climbing party. Back in the days, we could do that where, it's indoor rock climbing. You could do all this. Well, my older son is a very determined young fellow, and he really wanted to get the top of the wall, not just like the kiddie wall, like the top, like adult wall. He was like 8 at the time. I don't know. And so he would, like, your instinct with that, right, of course, is to like grab the little handles and pull yourself up. But as he discovered, he got really, really tired really quickly that way, and he couldn't get very far, and he'd he'd have to rappel back down, whatever. And he was just getting super frustrated. But then one of the, helpers came over, and they said to him, like, push with your legs, guide yourself with your hands, but push with your legs, because your legs are stronger than your arms are. And if you stop and think about that, well, of course your legs are stronger, because you may not go rock climbing all the time, but assuming you're able-bodied, like you walk all the time, like your legs have to support you. So this to me is like that analogy I love to draw when I'm, people kind of think about this. I'm like, you already have this, that you have already built strength. You may not be using that strength in the way that you thought, but that strength that you've built one place is absolutely strength that you can carry over. I mean, just look like what you're doing here, Joe, with all of this. I mean, everything that Corona TV is a product of strength that you've already built. Not doing this, but doing other things that have brought and that you can kind of bring over and shape and use use the equivalent of your hands to guide you in a new direction. But when you start from that, then you're starting from a place that you're already going to build. Yeah. And Steve is like, did he get to the top? Yes, he did get to the top. Good kid. Yeah. So yeah. Hey, Steve Garfield. So yeah, he did get to the top. But it came from that. And I just love that analogy of like push with your legs, guide with your hands. And I think that's true, whether you're thinking about yourself and what you're here for, or your business and what you're trying to do there is what, yeah, of course, have a vision of where you want to go, make those adjustments, but have the power, the force of what's getting you come from something that's grounded in what you've already built.
I want to try and build a little bit more. One more. Well, actually, I was going to say use my hands, but the whole point that I'm trying to make is not. When we think about our hands and our feet, the feet anchor us in terms of who we are and where we've come from. The hands are trying to pull us to that, as you say, to that unattainable or height that could also be like Icarus, right? With hubris. And so I think the way I look at that too is our feet anchor us. Our feet is all about that, the life we've made for ourselves, the life we built, whereas the hands are always trying to pull us away from that. Of course, you need both because standing still doesn't make sense either. But it's just a beautiful, rich way to think about because we feel, I guess, during these COVID times that we're lost, right? That we're out to sea, that we're not in control. And in many respects we aren't, but in others we're very much in control if we have that solid, ground to stand on.
And that's if I had one wish for both people and organizations during all of this, is to have that realization for themselves. I think because it's really natural, I loved in your intro, someone was like, hey, and complimented you on your pivot. And I don't even see this as a pivot. I see as a concentration and a focusing. And to me, that's the shift, right? It's for people who, and I've seen folks do this and businesses do, is saying, oh, well, everybody's over here, so let me move over there. But that's reaching with your hands, right? Rather than say, okay, this is what I do. How can I extend a hand and guide someone now back over to me and what my business does from wherever they are, right? So it might mean that, prior to all of this, a lot of folks would, I work with people in organizations and we're like, how do we get our big ideas out there? Well, when you're worried about how to keep the lights on in your business or your house, you're not so worried about like, how do we get a big idea out there? It's like, how do I make this relevant now? Well, guess what? The work that makes your work powerful enough to get out there and spread actually has its roots and relevance. So I can start to talk, so the only pivot that happened for me was to actually start from a different question, right? It's like saying, if Chicago stays in where Chicago is, you can get to it from a whole bunch of different places, right? And you're going to give people different directions on how to get to Chicago, whether, you're coming from St. Louis or whether you're coming from LA or whether you're coming from London, UK, right? That's the point. So if all of a sudden everybody goes to London, well, then figure out how you're going to tell them to get to Chicago, rather than say, you know what, everybody's in London, let me move to London where I don't know anybody. I haven't built the background. I don't have the community. I don't have the experience. I don't have the expertise. Do what you know. Figure out how to bring people to that. Don't try to necessarily do something fundamentally different because you're by definition not strong there. So it really does come back down to that.
I had a guest last week, a guy by the name of Bob Walheim, and I met him in Sao Paulo. And he said something very interesting to me. I think you would love this. He said, I said, how do I describe you? Digital pioneer, entrepreneur, innovator. And he said, no, you describe me or you define me as someone who is creative and curious. And I said, I love that. you define yourself based on your passions and your traits, and your skills, as opposed to a job title or a company or some kind of category that everybody buckets you into. And I just love the idea that wherever he goes and whatever he does in life, it will be, the description is, curious, creator, creative. I think that's kind of close to what you're saying as well, which is be true to yourself, and that requires looking inside yourself versus running off to wherever the flock or the herd, maybe that's a bad word to use the word herd, is zombieing to.
I love that. And it reminds me, I had the good fortune for different topic to be talking to a friend, fellow speaker, author, Brant Menswar. I don't know if he's been on your show yet today. And he's got a book coming out in a week, I think, called The Black Sheep. I think it's called Black Sheep. And what he's talking about are these 5 core values that you have that don't change over time. And the book is helping you figure out what those things are, how to use those to kind of guide what you do, et cetera. And, he and I were just having so much fun talking about that because, I look at the red thread as a way to describe why you do what you do the way that you do it, how to kind of turn what your ideas are into a narrative arc, but they arise from those things like those core values. And I'm so curious he's got an assessment in there and I haven't done it yet. I can't wait to figure out what my flock of 5 are. But I'd be very surprised if they were far different from a kind of a mantra that's been, that I've shared actually with my kids from, birth, which was be useful, be thoughtful, be passionate, be kind. So I'm just curious what my 5th one is. But if I, at the end of everything, whatever, if somebody, if someone used any one of those 4, particularly in combination some way, I'd be very happy because that really comes down to what I try to be about is, be thoughtful, think about things, don't snap to judgment, consider, review those, be passionate, infuse what you do with what you love and show it. Be useful. Don't just do it to do it. Make sure that it's actually moving something forward. Help other people, but not from a position of assuming that they're not already strong. They are strong. How can you be a useful tool to them? And probably the most important and the hardest one is that kindness piece. Because sometimes the best way to be useful is to be kind. And I think sometimes people forget that.
So they were useful, thoughtful, kind, passionate.
Yeah. I don't know what my 5th one is yet. Yeah, I haven't. So his is a flock of 5 and I haven't, if I were, I don't know if I had to pick out what a 5th one is. I'm curious to see how
I added generous. I added generous in as well now, thinking about it, because throughout this journey as well, what's been interesting is I call it superpowers. Like, what are the new superpowers? They're like patience, endurance, but this idea of selflessness and generosity. Generosity is a superpower. It's very much connected to kind, but the ability to be generous with one's time, with one, to give versus want back or take back. I don't know what they are, but maybe it's generous, maybe it's something else.
Well, I think they're probably, I think it is, to me, it's part of what's in usefulness. But so I have a woman that I work with who I refer to as my fractional CFO. Like, I neither need nor can afford a full-time CFO for my business. So, she helps me, in pieces and parts. But when all of this started, I, like most people, was like, dead panic. What do I do? Like, what do we do? Like, with, thankfully there was money in the bank, but how do I do this? Do I stop spending? Like, what happens? And she used this just gorgeous metaphor of how to think about money. And she said, a lot of times people think about money, very much as a fixed resource. And, it's kind of the classic pie analogy, like it's a pie, and rather than just saying, okay, we can make the pie bigger. She's like, I don't think of it like that. I actually think of money like a flame. And I can, like, if I have a candle and you have a candle and your candle isn't lit, I can give you my light and you now have light, but I don't have any less light. Right. And that kind of idea of that kind of frame, not just so, how that translated into financial advice was she was basically saying, like, continue to invest, continue to spend money, because the more that we've got money moving through the system, the more everybody's going to be okay. If we stop money through the system, if we stop the transfer of the flame, then everybody's dark. And I just thought it was an applicable idea so far beyond that as well. I saw kind of a different frame on that earlier in our conversation, which basically was talking about just being kind, because it basically said, like, your flame doesn't get brighter by putting somebody else's out. Right. And it's that same kind of idea. But I think, what's interesting to me about these elements of, whether they're your values or they're the pieces of your red thread or whatever, whatever you use to establish an anchor to meaning for yourself. These are things that they're the reason why certain people, you kind of more instantly align with some people and then not others. So, thinking back to your seated soliloquy, you were correct in that it's both a distinctive thing and a common thing, because one of the reasons why I love the analogy so much is that you can weave this together, which is a very different kind of mindset and a different kind of frame than the kind of classic brand mindset that you and I have, grown up with and known and whatever. I mean, think it just, what's a brand? It's literally something seared, like either into a wooden cask, which is where it started, or into butt of a cow. That is not a thing you can share, right? Yeah, it's recognizable. Yeah, it's shared, but it's not a thing that you can do something else with. But a thread can be equally distinctive. In fact, I just, in a promotion I saw for Ryan Halliday's new book, I forget what it's called, but kind of, it's essentially like things he learned, like how dead philosophers can help you right now. He tells yet a fourth story. So you named two of the, now I know 4 origin stories for the red thread. Where he was talking about ancient philosophers who were talking about the red thread standing out amongst white threads, right? But I just love this idea that you can intertwine that thing that makes you distinct and is core to who you are. And where you tend to twine best are with people who share those kinds of values, frames, outlooks, and approaches. And so that's why it's so important to have clarity on those things, because it makes it so much easier to actually find those associations, find those common threads, find that common ground, and be able to actually do something together, forward, and you build something strong, right? Because the more threads you have in a piece of fabric, the stronger it all is, and the stronger each of them is. Like each individual thread gains strength from the ones around it. And I just love that idea.
I was smiling as you were talking, because I was thinking to myself, going back to that classic example of brand. The thing is, when you brand, well, first of all, the irony of branding the butt of a cow, it gets into the idea of bull. We're back to minotaurs and bull, but there's also something so kind of interesting in that analogy, Tamsin, which is the fact that when you brand, there's something so immovable and fixed and permanent, which
finite about it.
Which is terrible, because aren't we evolving as humans? Aren't we evolving as humanity? Shouldn't we be changing? But the big problem with these brands and companies is they're not changing, or they're not changing quick enough. So we have to rethink. We should even stop using the word brand, because it.
Why do you think I came up with the red thread? I mean, from the marketing branding side of my life, this was like, branding is broken. We need something else, and we can't just change the word because nobody's going to do that. So I'm going to say, here's this other thing that actually gives rise to your brand, because if you know why you're doing what you do the way that you do it, it's your actions that create your brand, period. If we're going to get all marketing about it, and or even human personal brand, it's what you do and how you do it, right? A brand, the way we think of it, it is traditionally is so aspirational. So rarely does it actually come and encompass, think about how often there's a gap between how a company, you can clearly see how it wants to represent themselves versus what most people's interactive lived experiences with them, that there's no better example to me about why branding is broken than that. I mean, we can laugh now, but like United still uses Fly the Friendly Skies, which they are not, right? And it doesn't mean that there isn't, again, strength and value. I don't love United, but the thing is, they exist for their high-end flyers when we could fly. And to me, there's this kind of cowardice involved in we're just going to say that we're friendly. And yet think about all the people who are totally disenfranchised by that versus we take care of the people who take care of us. Okay, you're going to tick some people off, but it's going to be a lot clearer who you're for, why you do what you do, and you're not going to have that dissonance that creates, so many opportunities for people to be like, what the heck are you doing? But I could soapbox rant about that all day long.
I almost feel like what you need right now is an airline to come out and go and say something along the lines of, is there anything that sucks more than flying right now? We are our goal here is to just reduce the suck. Or minimize the suck, because if there's one thing worse than flying right now, it's actually being in the business of flying other people. I mean, that's honest, at least.
100%. Well, and it was funny because I am, JetBlue does not have multiple levels of flyers, but back in the time when we fly, I would have had it because I took so many flights on JetBlue every year. So I'm sure they sent this survey to everybody that kind of was clearly them trying to figure out what would it take to get you to fly? And the thing is what it would take to get me to fly is some faith in my fellow human and or JetBlue's ability to manage disagreements between fellow humans. And I think that's more than it's fair to ask any airline to do. But I think because how are they going to, but that's what would be required. Either you make it really clear to me that if somebody doesn't play along with the social contract of wear a mask, whether you agree with the reasonings or not, they understand that that's the requirement to get on the plane. What do you do differently? How do you get to a different point with that? And what can they do to, what can an airline actually do to reinforce that or to make sure that I wasn't going to get attacked or whatever? I don't know.
But this is coming back to the idea of discovering purpose and meaning, right? This is, one of the things that I'd asked you what was on your mind was this idea of, this battle between persuasion and polarization, right? That we're sitting in this limbo right now, putting all of our hopes and dreams on the the magical vaccine. And even in that scenario, there are going to be people that are not going to be, that are going to refuse to take it. And then I was thinking to myself, to your point, an airline that actually says, we've got your back. So if anyone's going to give any uphill or push back on any of these safety requirements, they're out. So it's having a point of view, or it's pick a lane, right? It's pick a side. That's what Jeffrey Hazlett said last week. Pick a side.
Yeah, pick a side and understand. And this gets to this point of persuasion and polarization. Pick a side and understand that the people on the other side are also smart, capable, and good. And that is, I think, where so much of what's happening right now breaks completely down. Because if you think about, most people, whatever side you're on, people look at the other side and go, they're crazy. That's ridiculous. How stupid can you be to believe X or to see Y? But that many people can't be stupid and crazy. They really can't, no matter which side you're on. And so this is one of the things that I talk about in my keynote, but it's in one of my keynotes, but humans need, like fundamental, like one of the most meta needs is to, and like what needs, wants, and belief is to be seen as smart, capable, and good is how I like to frame it. And even if you don't particularly believe it yourself about yourself, you definitely want to be seen as smart, capable, and good. And so the thing is, this is why it's so important when you're talking to somebody who has a different perspective than you do, that for me, it's to start from that perspective of this is a smart, capable, and good person. I'm going to start from that point of view. How is it that as a smart, capable, and good person, that this stance, this action, this behavior makes sense to them? Because we do not operate as humans in ways that don't make internal sense. We will not do something externally that does not make sense internally. And so starting that from that perspective is also the hint to where you can get people to start to where you can open up avenues where there's an opportunity to moderate a position. Are you going to be able to get somebody from like A to Z in a conversation? No. But if you're willing to have that understanding the technical term for it is actually radical empathy, where you understand somebody's position well enough that you could argue for it yourself, even if you don't agree with it, but you could argue for it yourself. If you can start there, then what often ends up happening is that you validate what that person sees right now. You can validate, I get why you think this. I do. Like, of course, you look at, whatever side you want to be on. I can look at X, I can look at Y, I can look at Z, and I can see why that's the case. And that must feel, or that must have this kind of expectation for you. Does it? Yes. Even that itself, just validating someone's current position, is often so surprising to people that automatically starts to soften the polarization just a little bit. Because what ends up happening is that you end up triggering another thing that is true of humans, and that is something that Dr. Robert Cialdini does a lot of, has talked a lot about, which is reciprocity, right? If we're just kind of wired as humans, is if you do something for me, I'm going to do something for you. And so one of the things you can, if we're trying to think, how do we moderate polarization a little bit, is you have to moderate your position first. If you want somebody, if you're trying to get somebody else to moderate their position, you actually have to find out you have to do it yourself first. Like you have to. And that comes from really trying to understand that. But once you can do that, then people are much more likely to go, well, you know what, you showed respect for where I'm coming from. By and large, not 100% of the time, by and large, people are going to be positioned then after that to show respect and to be open to showing to respect to where you're coming from. Are you going to come to agreement? Maybe not, but at least you've taken the friction.
Yeah, but it's actually, it's interesting because another thing that we in the world of marketing and branding is this idea of messaging. And when we think about persuasion, right, which is meant to be part of our arrow in our quiver, and we think about versus polarization, something else that you have a very famous tweet, which is stop trying to figure out if your cow is purple enough. Start figuring out if your audience even wants milk. And I think that empathy, that radical empathy comes down to understanding why are people behaving the way they are? Why are they saying what they are? And until you figure that out, standing out from the crowd is just gonna fall on deaf ears because the relevance, the connection, the reciprocity, to your point, is not there.
Right, and it's because we're not offering it. I mean, we're starting often from this position. It's oftentimes we're starting from the position that we're 100% right. And another thing, I didn't include it in kind of conversations, but a thing that's really been interesting to me because it's all wrapped up in all of this. Been some discussions lately about the true nature of expertise. And there's this great article, figure out how I can get that to you or drop it in the comments later, that in Eon that was talking about this, and that experts, really the difference between a non-expert and expert actually comes down to the difference between knowing whether or not a question is answerable or not. And that, so if you talk about, scientists, the reason why they're so reliant on data and whatever is that, and why so often they feel like, they're hedging their bets. A lot of people feel that way is because a lot of times there isn't enough information for them to determine whether or not a question can be answered. Once there is, that's when you hear scientists go, yeah, this is the answer, at least based on what we know so far. But it's been a really interesting perspective for me to take towards seeing what a lot of people who are trying to act like experts and be declaring like, this is the right answer. It's like, do you actually know whether or not that's an answerable question? Because if you don't, then I'm going to choose to keep listening and looking for the people who have enough actual expertise for me to trust whether or not they've determined whether or not this question can be answered or not. Oh, thank you, Amy, for putting that in there. So yeah. But the whole thing about the purple cow, and let me be clear, like I adore Seth Godin. I do. And purple cow is very important, but it presumes a certain point of understanding between like where your audience is and where you're meeting them. And purple cow assumes that you've already got people looking for milk or looking for cows. And even if it doesn't, right, because I think this original metaphor was like, if you're driving along and you just see like black and white cow after black and white cow, eventually you stop paying attention to the black and white cows, but you're going to notice a purple one. And that's true. But my point is that that's a fleeting source of attention, so difference snares attention, but relevance keeps it. Right. So that's why to me, it's always more important to really establish that, you have an answer that somebody's looking for, that whatever you're offering is an answer to a question they have, a need they're trying to fill, a problem they're trying to solve first. And by the way, the vast majority of businesses, I think, and the messaging I see doesn't even hit that bar. Like, it's just so opaque. Like, what is it that you do? Why should I care? That we miss that.
That was so meaty, as in beefy, as in from the Minotaur or the bull. But there's so much to unpack in that, and maybe that will be a good little tease for people to come and join us in the Zoom after show, which we're going to head to briefly. But I really, really love this. Tamsin, in across 10, 15 interviews that I've had since I've started this, lots and lots of discussion about questions and answers and curiosity and golden questions versus beautiful questions, versus humility to be able to say, I don't know. But I love that. I've never heard that idea about how expertise and Lord knows we come from a business where there are lots of self-proclaimed gurus and ninjas and experts when it comes to marketing and digital, etc. But what I thought we would leave with is a little game I like to play, which is called Guess the Quote. Okay. And I think it sums up you and it sums up today really beautifully. And this is your quote. Life has no meaning. Each of us has meaning, and we bring it to life. It is a waste to be asking the question when you are the answer. So do you know who said that?
No, I mean, it's very much in the spirit of Viktor Frankl, but I don't think it is Viktor Frankl. I don't know.
Joseph Campbell,
storyteller. Yeah, classic.
But I love it because whilst I knew coming into this we were going to be talking about meaning, what I didn't anticipate, and obviously I'd already found my quote, was the question, right? Asking the question, or at least coming up with the answer. But if you want to get the right answers, you have to ask the right questions. And the question isn't what is the meaning of life. The question is, how do we find the meaning in ourselves and bring that to life, and bring life and bring it to other people to give them life as well.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's what the red thread is. It's how you connect your answers to questions. Like, why is it you hear a question, you have an answer to it. What is the path that you take? Why is it that you choose that answer as yours? And if you've got clarity on that, then you have your hold on something that can guide you through so many things in this life.
Well, this was Tamsin Webster. Let me tell you, your Twitter handle is the way that I think of you now, as in Tama Dear, as in Dear Tam. You are dear, and you're dear to me. This was another, just very meaningful conversation, I would say. But for those of you that want to find out more about Tamsin and the yarn that is filled with red threads that will help you find your way and not get lost, and then come back to where you needed to come back to, you can go to and you can find out more at tamsinwebster.com. You can follow her on the socials and, of course, on Twitter. She's Tama Dear. You can also sign up for her series on Medium. That is a bit of a mouthful to have to write down. But one of us will go back to the comment thread at this point and make sure that we paste that in, or you can just type it out. You can sign up for Tamsin's newsletter at tamsinwebster.com/newsletter. And other than that, Tamsin, final word is yours.
Well, I think that, in the spirit of Joseph Campbell, like all of us have that, all of us are slowly building the narratives of our life. And ultimately, that's what the red thread is that that's the path that you follow. It is, back to your point, this kind of red thread of fate. It's the thing that connects you to other people, because it's how you can connect with other people. It is the thing that makes you distinctly yours. And for that actually has its root in the British Royal Navy, but I'll let people find that one. So many different things really comes down to what makes you strong already is what you've been doing all along. So what a pleasure to be here, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And we'll be back tomorrow with John Battelle. Come join Tamsin and I at the Zoom After Show. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at coronatv.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.